Hey, I'm sorry I don't have an Untitled review show for you this week, but kind of for good news. Yes, the fatigue did hit me, again this week, and that's what, delayed me from getting that out to you. But I went a whole solid week with no fatigue, no brain fog, no nothing. And that I don't think has happened in over a year, just having like none of that at all. So I definitely see that as like a huge improvement, because even when I had like a good week or a good month, there was always a little bit of it, like maybe my ADD would get really, really bad. I couldn't focus, or I'd get tired, like not involuntarily, but I'd just be like really, really tired. Like I wouldn't do the closing eye thing, but be really out of it. So there was always a little bit of a ramp. But the past week, I mean, not only did I feel like none of that, but I had a lot of energy and felt really, really good. So I see it as a win, even though this week, it did put me to sleep a couple times. I was supposed to write today, and I did. I wrote, a little bit, but then I just sort of stared blankly at the computer like this, and then I went and lay down, and I'm like, okay, writing today is a wash, so I said, why don't I go see the new Crow, because I'm either going to fall asleep, which was going to happen anyway, or I'll stay awake long enough to do a review of it. And thankfully, I did stay awake for all of it, even though there are a couple times, I don't think because of the fatigue, but there are a couple times I was really tempted to fall asleep. But before I go into that, I should say what I thought of the original Crow, the Brandon Lee movie, and you might be surprised to know that I like it. I don't love it. And I know that is surprising when you look at like all the weird art I got up here. You'd think I'd be a diehard Crow fan, but I do enjoy it. I think everyone's going to have that different dark comic book movie that they like. I mean, for me, it's Batman. For a lot of people, it's Batman. But I'm not surprised when, for some people, it's The Crow. It definitely is a very 90s goth, cool stylized comic book movie, and the story is very simple. It's just a dude getting revenge, for the murder of himself, and his dead wife comes back from the grave and everything, and that's about it, and that's all it needs to be, I suppose. I guess I was looking for a little bit more, just a little bit more, to it with like the story and characters, but they're all serviceable, and the style again is just unbelievable. And I haven't read much of the Crow comic, but after I saw the movie, I did go and check it out a little bit, and I was just amazed how much it looked exactly like the original comic. So I was really blown away by that. I haven't really revisited it that much since it came out. I think I saw it like maybe one other time, so I probably will watch it again, because I think I've been away from it long enough where I can revisit it and say, okay, have my thoughts changed about this? I get the feeling I might, at least from a visual standpoint, I might like it a little bit more, because visually a lot of that imagery is always going to stay with me. So as a lot of people have said, with this new one, the idea of remaking it seems odd and kind of pointless, but one of the reasons I want to make it clear I like the original but I don't love it is that I was going into this with an open mind. The trailer didn't look great, but I don't think it looked quite as bad as everyone was making it out to be. It did look like it had some good actors in it and some good visuals and everything, but because the visuals in the original were just so strong and so like the original comic, you have to really do something different with a reboot to this, because again, I mean, if you're like me, those visuals are just gonna stay with you forever. Him walking towards the broken window, the makeup that he's got, that city, the Crow lighting up in fire and everything, the rain, the weird way he walks that he then took from Dark City as well. The strangers walk that way too. So there's all sorts of visuals that just always stick with you, and this one very clearly isn't gonna be that. If they wanted to really redo this and do it right, it's already very tricky to do, but you'd have to do something like, I don't know, make it animated, or you'd have to go like the Sin City route. You'd have to just create a whole new style that just embraces that world even more somehow, but it's so tricky because the original embraced it so much. But I still wanted to get across that I did have definitely not high hopes for this movie, but I did go in with an open mind. I wasn't going in expecting to hate it. And with that said, the real tragedy of this film is that if the original Brandon Lee Crow did not exist, if they never made a movie out of the Crow, I think this would find an audience. I think it would be the same audience as Constantine. Now, that's a movie I didn't like, and I was actually shocked to find that that did find an audience. But my thought is that the people that like that film and the pacing of it and kind of the visual style of that would probably like this film too if they didn't see the original Crow, which, let's be honest, a lot of people have seen Constantine have probably seen the original Crow. I feel like there's a lot of crossover with that. But this film does have a pretty good visual language. I guess this director has done other films are very visually pleasing, but don't always have like the best story to them and the best writing. And this one's no exception, but there are some things that do help it out quite a bit. The acting's very good in it. It's actually so good that they make the very clumsy script sometimes sound natural. But if you think about it, even for a second, the lines don't really make a whole lot of sense. Let me think of some. There's one where the girlfriend is telling Skarsgård, he's saying, have you ever truly loved anyone before? And he says, no. And she says, well, if you ever do, be sure to love me more, or love me harder, I think is the line. And it's like, wait, that almost sounds like something, but no, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. What was it? Somebody calls the bad guy in this, and he has a line he's trying to make sound natural. He's trying to, put it in a way where you would say, yeah, that's something a normal person would say. And it was something like now I'm gonna blank because it was so weirdly worded. Something like the essence of him cannot be destroyed is within him. Something like that. It isn't quite that bad, but it's something along those lines where, again, you just kind of think about it and go, wait, that doesn't add up. There's a little moment here where, the Crow's asking for a gun, which already feels a little weird, but okay, different version, whatever. And the guy gives him one and he says, you're gonna need these. He holds out his hand, he puts something in his hand, it's like, whoa, what is it? And it's bullets. Yeah, obviously. Like why didn't you just hand them the bullets? Like, there's all sorts of little moments like that where you just think about the writing, even for a millisecond, it doesn't add up. The script for this movie is like the lyrics to Wish. They almost sound right, but then when you really question them, it completely falls apart, and it's kind of laughably bad. But on top of that, where the original, like I said, had a very basic story, this one throws in a lot more rules and, I guess, other supposed twists and turns, but they're not really that interesting, and they're laid out in a very odd way. I get the feeling this film had an edit that was pretty well paced out. Again, didn't have the best script, but pretty well paced out. And somebody, an editor or producer or somebody, got a hold of it and said, no, this has to go here. No, this song has to come in a little earlier. And it just messes stuff up just the right amount. For example, this movie opens, without giving away too much, the credits are playing in the corner, which is like, okay, that's a little weird for this visually, it's going to be this visually interesting movie. And this kid goes and he sees somebody die, and it's a flashback, and the main character is talking about the effect it had on him. And the credits are still going, and then it just cuts to him, what is very clearly supposed to be an opening credits sequence, and a song is playing and everything, and he's like in this black goo, and he's rising from the black goo and stuff, and then the title shows the Crow, and I'm thinking, why would anyone do that? Why would somebody get rid of this opening sequence of this guy rising from this goo, playing this cool song and everything, this cool music, and interrupt half of it with this opening sequence that clearly could have been shown just afterwards, of this kid discovering this death? The whole film kind of works that way, where it's like, man, it's onto something. It's got kind of this very cool visual language to it. That really does create its own identity. There were large parts of this movie where I was not comparing it to the original. Like, it was kind of doing its own thing, and it was doing it well enough. Now, I wouldn't say better than the original, but for example, they go a lot more into the relationship, with the couple in this. You really get to know them. Well, you see a lot of them together. Again, they do a weird thing where we're going to reveal more about them as it goes on, which is not needed, and I don't think makes sense, especially I think they're trying to treat some things as like a big surprise, and it's all stuff we either could have guessed or doesn't really add anything by holding it later, the information later. But you do get to see a lot of them together, and they have good chemistry, and the acting is really, really good. And like I said, I was kind of watching this, pointing out a bunch of little things that don't add up. Like, they escape from this prison ridiculously easily, like laughably easy, and then they wave down a car wearing like these prison garb, which are pink, which is kind of weird, but whatever. And they get it, like the people just like are like, yeah, go ahead, get in the back, and they're clearly escaped convicts. So there's all sorts of little things like that don't add up. And as you've seen in the trailer, like the makeup and the haircut and everything looks kind of ridiculous. They give him a ton of tattoos, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for the character. Again, the more you find out about him and the more they kind of reveal about him, I think they're playing him like he's kind of like a shy guy. He's like beaten up all the time in prison. He's kind of like the loser. And then, this young woman, starts talking to him and he opens up and everything. And just the more and more they reveal about him, the more that does not connect to what I guess they were trying to do with the character. And I think part of that is because they did tell it a little bit out of order. But when the two are together, the chemistry's not bad and the movie is entertaining enough. I like seeing these two together. I wanted to know, I guess not what was going to happen to them, but I wanted to know more about them. I thought their love for each other was interesting enough, and they both felt kind of lost with their backstory that they weren't revealing to us at that point, that I said, okay, I like these two. I don't want to see anything bad happen to them. And then when the bad stuff does happen, I don't think I'm giving anything away with that. Again, you all kind of know the story here. It gets pretty boring. They have him go to Purgatory, which is kind of a boring purgatory, which you could say is part of the point, but come on, there's more interesting purgatories than this. There's a guy there who's in between worlds, and he's supposed to be like kind of the mentor and tell him how everything works, and he's literally just there to say exposition. We don't know who he is. A lot of these people we just don't know about. There's a lot of cool actors playing the villains in this, and I'm thinking, man, they look cool, they got a cool attitude about them. I can't wait to see him interact with this character. I can't wait to find out more about him. And they're taken out of the picture before they can really get that strong an identity. Even the big villain in this, the big baddie that they're working their way up to, I'm waiting for what the big reveal is going to be about him, because again, they're kind of keeping him a secret. Like, well, okay, he made some sort of deal with the devil. So what's his backstory? What is it? And when you get to the end, I don't even think they really give you much. It's one of those things where you're waiting for sort of the big surprise, the big oomph, the big punch, the meat of the story to really kick in, and it never does. Everything just feels like it's delaying something important, and that important thing is never gotten to. And there's still a few moments that kind of work in. For example, I remember the original film being rated R. I don't really remember why. Again, it's been a while since I've seen it. I remember the visuals. I remember how dark it was, but I can't remember if it was especially gory, or if they just said the F-bomb a lot. I can't remember. This one, I remember why it's rated R. The gore in this is a lot of fun. And when they do have the few action sequences in it, they're pretty enjoyable, especially because they are purposefully clumsy and intentionally bloody. And I think that really adds a lot to it. Like, I think the first fight he starts off not really knowing how to fight. It's even kind of debatable at the end if he knows how to fight. It's more like, well, he just can't be killed, so like he can just keep going with it. But the fights, I think, are intentionally off. I think that's the idea of it. So people are running into swords, and like when he gets stabbed with a sword, he's like going through another guy, and then someone shoots him. He grabs the dead person's gun, points it to his chest, and shoots through the chest to hit the other guy. Like, it's purposefully silly and really, really bloody and over the top. The healing sequences are really cool too. How many times have we seen, characters that can't die get shot and then, heal up? We've seen it, to a point where it has no impact whatsoever. But this healing looks gross. You feel, nobody can heal like these characters can heal, but man, you feel like the organs are being put back in the body and everything. And Skarsgård's his acting is really, really good at making it feel like that's what's going on. So there's definitely things about it that work, and there's times where the pacing is pretty good, but there's also times where, like I said, scenes feel like they're interrupted, and it feels like other moments are just completely cut out. Again, I feel like the beginning and the ending especially, I feel like must have had some studio notes. I'm like, nah, this can't be how it originally was supposed to open up, and this can't be how it originally was supposed to end. They have a little bit of that Madam Web thing where people turn away or it's voiceover, and it just sort of looks like edits from other parts of the movie, and they're like, yeah, we didn't like the original ending, so we're just gonna make it this now. We're just gonna do a voiceover with some other footage, from the film that we easily, got from other moments. So yeah, it doesn't quite work. It doesn't quite come together. And of course, I mean, naturally, even when it does start to work okay on its own terms, you're going to be comparing it to the original. Like I said, there were good chunks of this movie where I was surprised I was not doing that. But you're just always going to be thinking back to those timeless visuals, how much easier it was to follow that story. Like I said, there's a lot more rules in this one. There's a lot more complicated lore, I guess, that they're trying to have here, and technicalities and details that it just don't make the world more fun. They don't make it more interesting. They don't pull you in more. If anything, they really take you out of it. So I don't hate this movie. I am surprised I got into it at times as much as I did, but there are so many clumsy moments of weird editing and bad dialogue and a lot of plot holes that don't add up, moments that go nowhere. But I will say it does have good performances. It does have a very clear visual language, but because the script is so clumsy, and you're obviously going to be comparing it to the original, it's kind of doomed. You really have to do something crazy different to make this movie work, and it doesn't. But I don't think it's as bad as everybody was thinking was going to be from the trailer. Like I said, if the original Crow did not exist, I get the feeling this would find, not like a big audience, but it would find a little bit of a niche audience. But because clearly anyone who would have seen this would have also seen the original, and they're gonna constantly compare it to that, and there just isn't enough of a new spin on it or anything really that smart to make it stand out, to make it different enough, or to make it better than the original. Like, there's nothing I can really think of that's better in this. I mean, I guess the romance is a little better, but again, that's kind of like comparing the romance of something like, I don't know, Sabrina with Harrison Ford and The Fugitive. Like, it's just kind of apples and oranges. Like, they just go about showing the chemistry between these two in totally different ways. Like, the original had it where they were already dead, and then you find out through flashbacks what their relationship was right and the love they had for each other, where, the other one would do it much more in order. Well, mostly in order. And it does work. And I do like this film does try to do a few different things, but need to do a lot more. And it needed to really be something different and unique. Instead, it's just, if you've never seen the original Crow, you might like it okay, and even then that's kind of a stretch, because I feel like there's a lot of moments you'd be looking at saying, oh wait, well, why did that character do that? Well, why didn't this go anywhere? Why didn't this connect? It really is a clunky script, and I think that's kind of the biggest issue with the movie. If it had a decent script, like, maybe people who never saw the original could get into it, but because it does, I don't know if it's going to find that audience. It might, because the gore in it is kind of fun. Even that big action sequence I was talking about where it gets really gory is done, like in an opera house while they're playing an opera. I mean, of course that's going to be stylized and fun, but yeah, there's not enough of that. The chemistry is still good with the romance, and the acting is good, and like I said, decent visual language, but it doesn't quite come together. So if you have seen this film, I don't know how many are going to. Everyone's already predicting how big a bomb it's going to be, but could be wrong. Maybe be a surprise hit of the year. Big surprise, but we'll have to see. What did you think of it? Did you think that it really was either just as good as the original, or it was something new and different enough that you had fun with it and you enjoyed the gore and the different style of it? Or do you think it's just 10 times worse than what the original trailer made out, and just everything about it just crumbled and nothing can beat the original? Or are you somewhere in between where you're like, you know what, it was okay just to see a fun little action flick on the big screen with some good blood and guts, and it was fine enough? Let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you next time. Take care.